The colony of New Haven was a beautiful place. Green fields stretched across the valley, and silver buildings reflected the light of two suns. Children played in the streets while their parents worked in the farms and factories. It was a peaceful world, far from the troubles of the galaxy. Katie Morgan stood at the front of her classroom, watching her students draw pictures of their families. She loved teaching these children. They were curious and kind, always asking questions about Earth, the planet their grandparents had left behind. Katie had been on New Haven for 5 years now, and she couldn't imagine living anywhere else. "Miss Katie," said a small voice. It was Zoe, a 7-year-old girl with bright eyes and messy brown hair. "When will the aliens come to visit?" Katie smiled. The colony had received news that a delegation from the Vecthory Dominion would arrive today. The adults were nervous about it, but the children were excited. They had never seen aliens before. "They should be here soon," Katie said. "But remember, we stay inside during the meeting. The grown-ups need to talk to them first." Zoe nodded and went back to her drawing. She was drawing her mother and father with a small dog beside them. Katie felt a warmth in her heart. These children were the future of humanity among the stars. Outside the school, the Vecthory ships descended from the sky. They were dark and angular, like insects made of metal. The colonists gathered in the town square to greet them, trying to hide their unease. Nobody really knew what the Vecthory wanted. They were a powerful empire, and New Haven was just a small farming colony. Ambassador Crystal stepped out of the lead ship. He was tall and thin, with 4 arms and eyes that reflected no light. His body was covered in hard plates, and when he moved, his joints clicked like breaking sticks. Behind him came 24 Vecthory soldiers, carrying weapons that hummed with energy. Governor Paul Adams stepped forward to greet the ambassador. "Welcome to New Haven," he said, his voice steady despite his fear. "We are honored by your visit." Crystal made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Honor," he repeated, as if the word amused him. "Yes, we are here to observe your species, to learn about humans." The meeting moved inside the government building. The colonists returned to their work, relieved that nothing bad had happened. They didn't notice the Vecthory soldiers spreading through the colony, studying the buildings, counting the people, watching the children. In her classroom, Katie felt something wrong. She couldn't explain it. The air felt heavy, and a cold fear grew in her stomach. She walked to the window and looked outside. A Vecthory soldier stood across the street, staring at the school. He wasn't moving, just watching. Katie stepped back from the window. "Children," she said, keeping her voice calm, "let's play a game. Everyone get under your desks and stay very quiet. Like hide and seek." The children giggled and crawled under their desks. They thought it was fun. Katie wished she could feel the same way. The attack came without warning. Explosions tore through the town square. Screams filled the air. Katie heard the sound of energy weapons firing, and then the front door of the school burst open. Vecthory soldiers poured into the building. They moved fast, grabbing children and dragging them toward the door. Teachers tried to stop them. Katie saw old Mr. Peters throw himself at a soldier, and she saw the flash of light that ended his life. "Run!" Katie screamed at her students. "Go to the basement, hide!" She grabbed Zoe and 5 other children, pushing them toward the back of the classroom. There was a storage closet there, hidden behind a bookshelf. She shoved the children inside and pressed her finger to her lips. "Don't make a sound," she whispered. "No matter what you hear, stay here until someone safe comes for you." Zoe's eyes were full of tears, but she nodded. Katie closed the door and pushed the bookshelf back in place. Then she turned to face the soldiers coming through the classroom door. She had no weapons. She had no training. She was just a teacher. But she stood in front of that bookshelf like a wall, and she did not move. The lead soldier pointed his weapon at her. "Where are the young ones?" "Gone," Katie said. They ran away. You won't find them." The soldier studied her for a moment. Then, he shot her. Katie fell, but even as her life faded, she smiled. The children were safe. That was all that mattered. Across the colony, similar scenes played out. Parents fought with their bare hands against armed soldiers. Grandparents shielded grandchildren with their bodies. 17 adults died that day, all of them protecting children. But it wasn't enough. The Vectory took 93 children, loading them into their ships like cargo. Then they left. The dark ships rose into the sky and vanished into the stars, leaving behind a colony in ruins and hearts shattered beyond repair. Lieutenant Commander Jake Harris was on patrol duty when the distress signal reached his ship. The message was broken and desperate, filled with screaming and crying. He ordered his vessel to maximum speed and reached New Haven in 4 hours. What he found would haunt him forever. The town square was covered in blood. Buildings were burning. Survivors wandered through the streets, their eyes empty and lost. Jake had served in the military for 15 years. He had seen battles and death. But nothing had prepared him for this. A small girl walked toward him. It was Zoe, still covered in dust from the storage closet. She had waited there for hours, just like Miss Katie had told her. When she finally came out, everyone was gone. "The monsters took my friends," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They took Lily and Ben and Emma. They took everyone." Jake knelt down in front of her. His hands were shaking. "We're going to find them," he said. "I promise you. We're going to bring them home." He carried Zoe to his ship and sent an emergency message to Earth. The message was short, but it contained everything: the attack, the dead, and the children taken by the Vectory within hours. Every human in the galaxy knew what had happened, and something changed in the heart of humanity. Something ancient and terrible woke up. The Vectory had made a mistake that no amount of power could fix. They had harmed human children. Now they would learn what that meant. The news spread across human space like fire through dry grass. Every screen on every planet showed the same images: the burning colony, the weeping survivors, and the faces of 93 missing children. Parents held their own children tighter that night. Grandparents remembered wars they had fought long ago. Young people who had never known true anger felt it for the first time. On Earth, President Lavra Bennett stood before the United Human Congress. The Great Hall was silent. 2,000 representatives from every human world sat in their seats, waiting for her words. But before she spoke, she played the recording from New Haven. They heard the screams. They heard Katie Morgan's last words. They heard little Zoe asking where her friends had gone. When the recording ended, many representatives were crying. Others sat with their jaws tight and their hands gripping their chairs. "The Vectory Dominion did this," President Bennett said, her voice steady and cold. "They came to our colony under a flag of peace. They smiled at our people. And then they murdered our citizens and stole our children." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Intelligence reports tell us that the children were taken to the Vectory homeworld. They are being held in a research facility. The Vectory see them as test subjects for genetic experiments. They believe humans are weak. They believe we will do nothing." A murmur ran through the Congress. Representatives shifted in their seats, their faces showing disbelief and growing fury. "The Galactic Council has advised us to seek a diplomatic solution," the president continued. "They tell us that the Vectory are too powerful to challenge. They suggest we accept compensation and move forward." She leaned forward, her eyes hard. "I rejected their advice." The Congress erupted in applause. Representatives stood from their seats, shouting their support. For the first time in a generation, humanity was united in a single purpose. In a military base on Mars, Admiral Connor Walsh received his orders. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from battles long past. He had fought pirates and rebels and hostile aliens. but he had never led a mission like this. Intelligence officer Amy Dalton briefed him on the situation. She showed him images of the Vecthory research facility, a massive complex deep in the heart of their capital city. The children were being held in underground chambers, guarded by hundreds of soldiers. The Vecthory have 1,000 warships defending their space, Amy said. We have 400 available for immediate deployment. The odds are not in our favor. Admiral Walsh studied the images for a long moment. Then he looked at Amy. How many children are still alive? Amy swallowed hard. We intercepted communications 3 hours ago. 23 children have died from the experiments. 70 are still alive, but they are scheduled for more procedures. We have maybe 2 weeks before. She couldn't finish the sentence. Walsh nodded slowly. Then we leave in 3 days. Every ship we have. Every soldier who can fight. We're bringing those children home. Across human space, the call went out. Recruitment centers opened their doors and were immediately overwhelmed. Veterans who had retired decades ago showed up with their old uniforms, demanding to serve. Young people who had never held a weapon lined up to learn. Factory workers volunteered for double shifts to build more ships. More weapons, more supplies. Scientists abandoned peaceful research to work on military technology. Engineers designed new weapons in days that would normally take years. Doctors prepared medical ships to treat wounded soldiers and traumatized children. Everyone had a role. Everyone wanted to help. On the planet Kepler-7, an old woman named Grace Harper heard the news. She was 82 years old, a retired pilot who had flown cargo ships between colonies. Her hands shook now, and her eyes weren't as sharp as they used to be. But she walked into the recruitment center anyway. I can still fly, she told a young officer at the desk. Put me on a supply ship. Put me anywhere. Just let me help bring those babies home. The officer looked at her for a moment, then smiled and handed her a form. Welcome back to service, ma'am. At the Galactic Council, Ambassador Nathan Cole faced the representatives of a dozen alien species. They sat in a great circular chamber, their forms strange and varied. Some looked like living crystals. Others resembled animals from Earth mythology. All of them watched Nathan with a mixture of curiosity and concern. We understand your anger, said the crystalline representative, his voice like chiming bells. But the Vecthory are powerful. A war with them would cost millions of lives. Surely compensation can be arranged. Resources, territory, perhaps even the return of some children. Nathan stood perfectly still. When he spoke, his voice was calm and quiet. Some children, he repeated. You want us to negotiate for some of our children. Tell me, which ones should we leave behind? Should we make a list? Draw names from a hat? The chamber was silent. You don't understand humans, Nathan continued. You think we're like other species. You think we calculate costs and benefits, that we weigh our lives against our interests. And sometimes we do. But not when it comes to our children. He stepped forward, and something in his eyes made several alien representatives lean back in their seats. In our history, we have crossed oceans and climbed mountains and walked through fire for our children. We have fought wars against enemies 10 times our size. We have sacrificed everything, again and again, because that is what humans do. Our children are not bargaining chips. They are not acceptable losses. They are the reason we exist. He turned toward the door. We are not asking for your permission. We are not asking for your help. We are informing you, as a courtesy, that the United Human Federation is going to war. And when we are finished, the Vecthory will understand what every human parent has always known. He looked back over his shoulder. There is nothing more dangerous in this universe than someone who loves a child. Then he walked out of the chamber, leaving the alien representatives in stunned silence. 3 days later, 400 human warships gathered at the edge of Vecthory space. They carried 200,000 soldiers, pilots, engineers, and medics. They carried weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop stars. But more than anything, they carried the fury of a species that had been pushed too far. Admiral Walsh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Resolute. He looked at the stars ahead, knowing that beyond them lay the enemy and the children who needed rescue. "All ships," he said into his communicator. "This is Admiral Walsh. In a few hours, we will enter victory space. Some of us will not come back, but every one of us knows why we're here. Those children are waiting for us. Their parents are waiting for news. And we will not stop until every single child is safe." He paused. "Feeling the weight of the moment? Let's bring them home." The fleet jumped forward, vanishing into the light between stars. The reckoning had begun. The Victory High Commander Thrixavos received the news with amusement. 400 human ships were approaching his space. He commanded a fleet of over 1,000 warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything the humans had built. The idea that these soft, emotional creatures would challenge the Dominion was almost funny. "Let them come," he told his officers. "We will crush them quickly and then continue our research on their young. Perhaps we will capture more specimens from the battle." His officers clicked their jaws in agreement. They had studied humans and found them weak. Humans needed sleep. Humans felt pain. Humans loved their families so much that it clouded their judgment. The Victory saw these things as flaws. They did not understand that these were the very things that made humans dangerous. Admiral Walsh brought his fleet out of hyperspace at the edge of the Victory system. Before him stretched a wall of enemy ships, their dark holes blocking out the stars. Sensors counted 1,342 vessels. The largest was a command carrier the size of a small moon. "Admiral," said his tactical officer, "they outnumber us more than 3-1. Recommend we wait for reinforcements." Walsh shook his head. "The children don't have time for reinforcements. All ships, battle formation. We're going through." The human fleet arranged itself into a wedge shape with the strongest ships at the front. It was a formation designed for one purpose: to punch through enemy lines no matter the cost. Military experts back on Earth had said it was suicide. Walsh knew it was the only chance those children had. The Victory fleet moved forward to meet them. Energy weapons began firing at maximum range, filling space with deadly light. The first human ship exploded, then another, then another. But the fleet did not slow down. It accelerated. Captain Lisa Hart commanded the cruiser Defiance. She was 34 years old, with 2 daughters waiting for her back on Earth. When a Victory destroyer moved to block her path, she didn't try to avoid it. She aimed her ship directly at its center and increased speed. "All hands," she said over the intercom. "Prepare for impact." Her crew didn't hesitate. They knew why they were here. The Defiance struck the destroyer at full speed, and both ships vanished in a ball of fire. But the explosion tore open a hole in the Victory line, and 3 human ships flew through before the enemy could react. Across the battlefield, similar scenes repeated. Human pilots flew into enemy formations with no regard for their own lives. Engineers kept engines running long past their breaking points. Gunners fired until their weapons melted in their hands. For every human ship destroyed, they took 3 or 4 Victory vessels with them. High Commander Thrixavos watched his displays with growing confusion. His fleet was winning. Human ships were dying by the dozens. But the humans weren't retreating. They weren't even slowing down. They fought like creatures possessed, throwing themselves against his forces with a fury he had never seen. "What is wrong with them?" he demanded. "Why don't they run?" None of his officers had an answer. While the main fleet fought, a small group of ships broke away from the battle. These were fast, quiet vessels designed for stealth operations. They carried Captain Megan Torres and her Special Forces team, the Reapers. Megan was 41 years old. She had been a soldier for 20 years, fighting in conflicts across human space. But this mission was different. This wasn't about territory or resources or politics. This was about children, and that changed everything. Her team included 20 of the best soldiers humanity had. Among them was Sergeant Derek Holt, a big man with gentle eyes and hands that could crush stone. His daughter Lily was one of the children taken from New Haven. Derek hadn't slept in days. He hadn't eaten. He had only one thought in his mind: find Lily and bring her home. Approaching Vector Prime, the pilot announced. Enemy patrols are focused on the main battle. We should be able to reach the surface undetected. Megan nodded. Take us down. Fast and quiet. The stealth ships descended through the planet's atmosphere, dodging defense systems and patrol flights. They landed in a forest 2 miles from the research facility, hidden by tall trees with purple leaves. The Reapers moved out immediately, running through the alien forest like shadows. The facility was a massive structure of black metal, guarded by walls and towers and hundreds of soldiers. Getting in would be nearly impossible. Getting out with 70 children would be even harder. But nobody on the team mentioned these things. They simply moved forward, step by step, toward the walls. Back in space, Admiral Walsh's fleet had lost nearly half its ships. 180 vessels remained, facing over 800 Vectori. By any military calculation, the battle was lost. Walsh should have ordered a retreat. Instead, he ordered his fleet to increase speed. Sir, his first officer said carefully, if we continue this course, we will be completely destroyed. Maybe, Walsh replied, but we'll take enough of them with us to give Torres a chance. That's all that matters. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is Walsh. I know what I'm asking. I know the numbers. But right now, 70 children are waiting for us. They're scared and hurt and alone, and they need us to buy them time. So I'm not ordering anyone to stay. If you want to retreat, you have my permission. No one will think less of you. He paused, listening to the silence on the channel. But I'm staying, and I think those children deserve everything we have to give. Not a single ship turned back. Instead, the human fleet surged forward with renewed energy. Pilots who had been fighting for hours found new strength. Engineers who had given everything found a little more. The Vectori line began to buckle. High Commander Thrixivos couldn't understand it. His forces were superior. His ships were stronger. But the humans kept coming, kept fighting, kept dying without fear. It was as if they didn't care about survival at all, and then he realized something that made his blood run cold. They didn't care about survival. They only cared about those children. And nothing he did, no force he commanded, would make them stop. For the first time in his long life, the High Commander felt afraid. On the surface of Vector Prime, Captain Torres and her team reached the facility walls. Derek Holt placed explosive charges on a service entrance while the others took defensive positions. In 90 seconds, they would be inside. In 90 seconds, the rescue would begin. Derek's hands were steady as he worked. His heart was pounding, but his mind was clear. Somewhere inside that building, his little girl was waiting. She was probably scared. She was probably crying for her daddy. I'm coming, Lily, he whispered. Daddy's coming. The charges exploded, and the Reapers poured through the breach. The fight for the children had truly begun. The explosion tore through the facility wall, sending pieces of metal flying through the air. Captain Megan Torres was the first through the breach, her weapon raised and ready. Behind her came the Reapers, moving with speed and precision that came from years of training, and a fury that came from something much deeper. Vectori guards rushed to meet them. The aliens were fast and strong, their bodies covered in natural armor. But the Reapers were faster. They moved through the corridors like a storm, clearing rooms and eliminating enemies with deadly efficiency. No Vectori who raised a weapon lived more than 3 seconds. Map says the holding cells are 3 levels down, Megan said, checking her tactical display. Stay tight, move fast, don't stop for anything. They descended through the facility, fighting their way past guards and security systems. The Vectri had not expected an attack this deep in their territory. Their defenses were designed to stop armies, not small teams of determined soldiers. It was a mistake they would not live long enough to regret. Derek Holt moved at the front of the team, his eyes scanning every shadow. He could feel Lily somewhere ahead. He didn't know how he knew, but he was certain she was close. Every step brought him nearer to his daughter, and nothing in the galaxy was going to stop him. They reached the holding level. The corridor stretched before them, lined with heavy doors. Behind those doors were the children. The Reapers spread out, planning explosive charges on each door simultaneously. On my mark, Megan said. 3, 2, 1, mark. 20 explosions sounded at once. 20 doors flew open. And then silence fell as the soldiers looked inside and saw what the Vectri had done. The children were in small cells, barely large enough to lie down. Many of them had bandages on their arms and heads where the aliens had performed their experiments. Some were crying. Some were too exhausted to cry. They looked up at the soldiers with eyes that had seen too much horror for their young years. Derek found Lily in the 5th cell. She was sitting in the corner, her knees pulled up to her chest. When she saw her father, her eyes went wide. "Daddy?" She whispered, as if she couldn't believe it was real. Derek dropped to his knees and pulled her into his arms. "I'm here, baby," he said, his voice breaking. "Daddy's here. I've got you. You're safe now." Lily clung to him and began to sob. The sound broke something in Derek's heart and rebuilt it at the same time. His daughter was alive. She was in his arms. Nothing else mattered. Across the holding level, similar reunions played out. Soldiers who had killed dozens of enemies without blinking now cried openly as they lifted children from their cells. These hardened warriors, trained to face death without fear, were reduced to tears by the sight of small faces finally showing hope. Medic Hannah Price moved from child to child, checking injuries and providing emergency care. Some children had broken bones that hadn't been treated. Others had infections from dirty needles. All of them were malnourished and dehydrated. But 70 were still alive, and Hannah was determined to keep them that way. "We need to move," Megan said, forcing herself to focus on the mission. "Enemy reinforcements will be here any minute." The Reapers lifted the children who couldn't walk and guided those who could toward the extraction point. They moved back through the facility, passing the bodies of guards they had killed on the way in. Some children closed their eyes. Others stared without reaction. They had already seen too much death. Outside, the stealth ships were waiting. The pilots had been listening to the radio chatter, and they knew the children were coming. They had tears in their eyes too, but they kept their hands steady on the controls. "All children on board," Megan reported. Lifting off now. The ships rose into the sky, climbing toward orbit where the battle still raged. They had done it. Against all odds, they had found the children and pulled them out of that nightmare. Now they just had to get home. In space, Admiral Walsh received the message. Children recovered. Extraction in progress. He closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to feel relief. Then he opened them and returned to the battle. "All ships," he announced. "The children are safe. Now let's finish this." The human fleet, reduced to barely 100 vessels, pressed its attack with new energy. They had been fighting to buy time. Now they were fighting for victory. And the Vectri, shocked by losses they had never imagined, began to break. High Commander Thrixavos sent desperate messages to his emperor, requesting reinforcements. But the reinforcements were still hours away. His fleet was crumbling. Human ships tore through his formations, destroying vessels faster than he could coordinate a defense. Then the human flagship Resolute broke through the Vectri, line and entered orbit above Vector Prime. From there, Walsh could see the entire planet spread below him. Cities filled with millions of Vectori, military bases and research facilities and government buildings. A communication came through from the planet's surface. It was the Vectori Emperor himself, a massive creature with golden armor and ancient eyes. "You have your children," the Emperor said. "Take them and go. We will pay any compensation you demand. Just leave our world in peace." Walsh stared at the screen for a long moment. He thought about the 17 adults who had died protecting those children. He thought about the 23 children who would never go home. He thought about Zoe standing in the ruins of her school, asking where her friends had gone. "Compensation," he said quietly. "You think this is about money? You think we came here for territory or resources?" He leaned forward, and his voice became hard as steel. "You took our children. You tortured them. You killed 23 of them. And you want to talk about compensation?" The Emperor shifted uncomfortably. "What do you want?" "Justice," Walsh replied. "We want every Vectori who touched those children, every soldier who took them, every scientist who experimented on them, every politician who approved the operation. We want them all." "That is impossible," the Emperor said. "Some of them are high-ranking officials, respected members of our society. Then your society chose poorly who to respect." Walsh cut the communication and turned to his officers. "Begin orbital bombardment. Military targets only, for now. Let's see how long their respect lasts." The human ships opened fire on Vectori military installations across the planet. Bases exploded. Weapons factories burned. Defense systems crumbled into dust. The message was clear. Humanity was not leaving until justice was done. Back on Earth, the Galactic Council frantically contacted President Bennett. They pleaded with her to accept a Vectori surrender. They warned that continued aggression would change how every species in the galaxy viewed humanity. President Bennett listened patiently. Then she gave her response. Good. The bombardment continued. And one by one, the Vectori officials responsible for the attack on New Haven were surrendered to human forces. Scientists who had conducted experiments on children were dragged from their laboratories. Soldiers who had carried out the kidnapping were pulled from their homes. Politicians who had approved the operation were removed from their offices. Humanity had come for its children. Now it was collecting the dead. 6 months passed after the Battle of Vector Prime. The galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. Where the Vectori Dominion once ruled over dozens of star systems, there was now only silence. Their military had been destroyed. Their empire had crumbled. Their leaders had faced human justice for what they had done to the children of New Haven. The trials were broadcast across human space. Millions watched as Vectori scientists described their experiments in cold, clinical terms. Millions watched as soldiers admitted to killing teachers and parents who tried to protect the children. And millions watched as those responsible were sentenced for their crimes. Ambassador Kriegstahl, who had led the attack, was executed publicly. He showed no remorse until the very end. He still believed humans were weak, even as he faced the consequences of that belief. The humans watching felt no pleasure in his death. They felt only the grim satisfaction of justice served. The 70 surviving children were brought back to human space. They received the best medical care humanity could provide. Doctors healed their physical wounds. Psychologists helped them process their trauma. But some scars would take years to fade, if they ever faded at all. Little Zoe, who had hidden in the storage closet while her teacher died protecting her, was adopted by Nicole Morgan, Katie's younger sister. Nicole had never married and had no children of her own. But when she learned that Zoe had no family left, she didn't hesitate. She took the girl into her home and her heart. "I'm going to take care of you now," Nicole told Zoe on the first night. Just like Katie would have wanted. Zoe looked up at her with eyes that still held shadows of that terrible day. "Do you think Miss Katie can see us?" Nicole smiled through her tears. "I think she can, sweetheart. And I think she's very proud of you." Slowly, day by day, Zoe began to heal. She still had nightmares sometimes. She still flinched at loud noises. But she also started to laugh again, to play again, to dream about the future instead of reliving the past. Sergeant Derek Holt returned home with his daughter, Lily. His wife, Maria, met them at the spaceport. She ran across the landing pad and gathered them both in her arms, crying tears that she had been holding back for months. Their family was whole again. Lily's recovery was harder. She woke up screaming most nights, trapped in memories of the Vectory facility. She wouldn't let Derek out of her sight for weeks. But slowly, with patience and love and time, she began to find her way back to the little girl she had been before. "Daddy," she asked one evening, "why did the aliens hurt us?" Derek held her close, struggling to find words that would make sense to a child. "Some people in the galaxy don't understand love," he finally said. "They don't understand why we would do anything to protect our families. They thought that made us weak. They were wrong." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she hugged him tighter. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby girl. More than anything in the universe." Captain Megan Torres received the Federation's highest military honor for leading the rescue mission. She stood on a stage in front of thousands of people, a medal pinned to her chest, and felt hollow inside. She thought about the soldiers who hadn't come home. She thought about the children who had died before she could reach them. When reporters asked her what it felt like to be a hero, she shook her head. "I'm not a hero," she said. "I was just a human doing what humans do when children are in danger. Any one of you would have done the same." The reporters weren't sure she was right about that. But the soldiers who had served with her knew she was. Humanity had proven something on Vector Prime, something the galaxy would never forget. At the Galactic Council, representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what humanity had done. Some were horrified by the complete destruction of the Vectory Dominion. They called it excessive, brutal, a violation of galactic norms. They warned that humanity was dangerous, that other species should fear them. Others disagreed. They pointed out that humans had only attacked after their children were kidnapped and tortured. They noted that humanity had offered the Vectory many chances to surrender. The destruction of the Dominion was not aggression, they argued. It was consequence. Ambassador Nathan Cole addressed the council one final time. He stood in the center of the great chamber, surrounded by aliens who watched him with a mixture of fear and respect. "I know that many of you are frightened by what you've seen," he said. "You've watched humanity destroy an empire that has stood for thousands of years. You wonder if we might turn that power against you someday." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "We won't. Humans don't start wars. We don't conquer for territory or resources. We don't invade peaceful neighbors or kidnap their citizens. We want to explore the galaxy, to learn from other species, to build a future where all of us can thrive." His voice hardened. "But there's one line we will never allow anyone to cross. Our children are sacred to us. They are the reason we build and dream and hope. When you harm a human adult, you face human law. When you harm a human child, you face human nature." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every species represented there. There is no force in this universe more dangerous than a parent protecting their child. The Vectory learned that lesson. I hope no one else ever needs to learn it again. He walked out of the chamber, leaving behind a galaxy that finally understood something important about humanity. Years later, a monument was built on New Haven. It stood in the center of the rebuilt town, a pillar of white stone rising toward the twin suns. On the pillar were carved the names of the 17 adults who had died protecting the children. Below them were the names of the 23 children who had not survived captivity. At the base of the monument was a simple inscription: They were ours. We came for them. Human children played in the shadow of that monument, laughing and running and dreaming of the stars. Their parents watched them with grateful eyes, knowing how close they had come to losing everything. Across the galaxy, every species knew why those children were safe, because humanity was watching. On the other side of the galaxy, a young alien learned about humans for the first time. His teacher explained what had happened to the Vecthory Dominion. The young alien was confused. Why did the humans destroy an entire empire over a few children? He asked. His teacher thought for a long moment before answering. Because to humans, there is no such thing as a few children. Every child matters. Every single one. The young alien didn't understand. But his teacher knew that understanding wasn't necessary. Only remembering was necessary. As long as every species in the galaxy remembered what had happened to the Vecthory, human children would be safe. And that was exactly how humanity wanted it. Far away. On a green world with 2 suns, Zoe Morgan grew up strong and brave. She became a teacher, just like Katie had been. She taught children to read and write and dream. And sometimes, when her students asked about the monument in the town square, she told them the story. A long time ago, she would say, some very bad aliens tried to hurt human children. But humanity came for them, because that's what humans do. The children would nod, not really understanding. But someday, they would have children of their own. And then they would understand perfectly. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. Humanity had proven it.